Hello, I'm Martin Warwick and I'm talking with Dave Reekie of Metaswitch Networks. Why does Metaswitch have an open source business unit in the first place?
Slightly chicken and egg type question really. We have an open source business unit because we have an open source product. And in this case it was the product that came first. So this is our Clearwater product, which is an open source IMS core. We produced it, and then the decision to open source it came relatively late in its life, based on where it had got to and our feeling of that we needed to help the industry move faster in this whole area. And open sourcing this was a way to really kickstart the industry to go faster. So having created the open source product, we thought this is something we might want to do more of. This is a significant departure from what we've done before, so it does make sense to keep it separate from the rest of the business and think about it separately.
You mentioned Project Clearwater. Could Metaswitch have built something to do the same jobs that Project Clearwater does without being open source? Would there have been any point?
Would there have been a point? Good question. Could we have done it, to take your first question first? Yes. Absolutely, we could have written the code and not made it available open source. Absolutely. Would there have been a point? It certainly wouldn't have had the impact on the industry that it has had. And as I said, actually that was the key reason we chose to open source it. We wanted to get the industry to move faster, particularly because it's a tough time for the industry at the moment with the threat of over-the-top competition, and a lot of the industry is feeling that they need to innovate faster. And making this available open source has had that effect. Lots and lots of people have picked it up and just started using it and started learning about network function virtualization and about the software telco, learning by doing in a way that would not have happened had we not made it just freely available to people.
So is open source software helping accelerate the pace of network functions virtualization? And if so, how?
It is, yes. It's not necessary for network function virtualization. There's nothing magic in network function virtualization that says open source shall be used. But in practice, yes, it is helping. As I said, actually, Clearwater is an example of that. Because it's open source and available, telcos are grabbing it and playing. And that actually is a lot of the premise behind network function virtualization, the software telco, is learning by doing. It's not about waiting for your vendors to slowly create products that then sell to you. It's giving the telcos themselves more ability to innovate at their speed, and having open source products that they can just grab and take when they want to and start to use themselves and start to learn about the space is absolutely helping. You can also look at some specific technologies that are being used very widely within network function virtualization. I mean, OpenStack is a great example. Lots and lots of people are building on top of OpenStack at the moment because it's there, because it's open source. So that's absolutely helping too, as an example.
As far as some of the new developments, SDN and particularly NFV are concerned, they are not being led by the vendors, they're being led by the service providers and the telcos themselves. For once, the boot's on the other foot. What kind of an effect is that having?
You say it's been led by them, and it has within the industry as a whole. We have some exceptions to that, with our company. I mean, Clearwater is a great example. We started that in early 2012, well before October 2012 white paper came out. And the same actually for our session border controller. We first demonstrated that in a public cloud in early 2012 and did a press release about it then. And the reaction we got at the time was, why would anyone put a session border controller in a cloud? And well, the world has moved on now. But it is being led by the telcos, and I think that's fantastically positive for the industry. And again, comes back to why we open sourced it, to help them take that initiative and move fast themselves. Any other impacts of being led by the telcos? I guess it's created an interesting environment within the vendor community, which you probably get to see from speaking to lots of them. I personally, entirely personal, I like change. I like things being shaken up a little bit. So I'm enjoying seeing the boot being on the other foot in the industry at the moment. And I think the industry does need that change. That's what this is all about. It's about doing things differently to the way they've been done in the past. And I think the fact that the telcos are leading it is great for the industry. It shows their ambition and their desire to get to where they need to be.
Dave, a major theme in the global industry over the past few years has been the transformation of the telco into something else. I did an interview moderately recently with Zainal Barber, who's the CEO of PT, Portugal Telecom as it was, and he said for him the transformation is complete. PT is no longer a telco, it's an entertainment company. So for some organisations that transformation is over. Do you think all telcos are in the same place? He was happy to accept open source. Are all of them?
Speaking completely personally again, I don't think there were enough like that. I think there needs to be more. It's great, that example is great and shows what can be done when a telco grabs the initiative themselves and makes it happen. And one can point to others in the industry. Obviously, Telefónica's moves in this area have been well documented. Interesting how they had to go about it, of creating, not doing it within the heart of the business, but a little bit separate. Very interesting, but very well documented moves. But no, I don't think overall the industry has done enough. I think that's why the current initiatives are so positive, because they show a change there. But it can absolutely be done, and there are examples out there.
Are there any organisations, telcos out there already building web-scale applications that are designed for cloud computing?
I guess this comes back to that definition of telco again. In that you just talked about one telco who's rebranded themselves as an entertainment company. You can talk about other companies like Skype, WhatsApp, whoever you like, that are communications companies who've never called themselves telcos but are absolutely in the same business. Yeah, of course, this is what they do. This is how they've been successful, is building those web scale applications, taking advantage of the cloud, taking advantage of the economies of scale you can get like that. So within the communications industry, the industry that we're all in, absolutely there are examples of this. Have the traditional telcos been doing enough of that? Well, for my money, no. And that's what we're talking about today, is trying to help create that revolution and trying to help make that happen.
How does becoming a software telco relate to embracing open source software? Does it prompt change? Does one necessarily follow the other?
Not necessarily, no. Again, all the building blocks that you need can be produced by people and can be sold to you. That said, the people who are moving fastest at the moment are those who are getting stuck in and doing some of the work themselves, because they know what they want. So the use of OpenStack, for example, to create the environment is a great example of that. And a number of the leading telcos who are most strongly embracing this movement have teams of developers working on OpenStack, contributing to that project and helping to drive it in the direction they want. So they aren't waiting for the vendors to do absolutely everything for them. They are getting stuck in and they are creating their own destiny. They are making things happen for themselves. And that's going to be the case. The people who move furthest and fastest, at least initially, are those who are just doing just that, creating part of this ecosystem themselves. That said, the building blocks will come together and others will be able to follow afterwards behind those pioneering footsteps, and they will be able to build upon more traditional, if you like, products that they can get from established vendors.
On the other hand, Dave, do you find there is resistance to open source out there in the market?
Yes, we are. Let's be straight about that. There are some people we talk to whose initial reaction is still, "Ooh, open source, I don't want that in my network." You start to talk to them about Linux at that stage, and they start to get a bit confused in their thinking. So, it's still a process that we're going through, I think, of getting people to understand how the world is these days. But yeah. It's not a given for everybody that they'll just grab in and jump in and grab this with both hands today, but that's changing.
I'm glad you mentioned Linux, because that was my entire point about that, and it's interesting to see the reaction that you get. They say, "Oh well, there's always the exception." A final question to you, Dave, if I might, which is, how much of a change do you see coming?
I think that this isn't something that is that's starting today. The people who are moving fastest in this space and have already moved furthest have been at it for some time. As we discussed earlier in the interview, it's the telcos themselves that have been driving this initiative, and a number of those telcos themselves have been experimenting, often with open source, but often with developing things themselves for months or even years before their white paper in October of 2012. So This isn't a firing the starting gun today and look forward 12 months. It's more about how much further are people going to get in the next 12 months. I think the next 12 months will be interesting. I think it'll see the people who are furthest forward in this properly deploying large-scale systems. There won't be that many of them, I think, in the next 12 months, but I absolutely expect it to happen. And I expect that, therefore, the people will change how they view network function virtualization from, ooh, that's very interesting, it's the future, to, that's very interesting, it's now. So that's what I'd really like to see being the change over the next 12 months.
Dave Reekie, thank you.
My pleasure.